Hello everybody, my name is KingStix and today I want to talk to you about why no one should play Nunu whether you're a beginner or a veteran. Something to keep in mind before you embark on watching this video is that I've made many Nunu guides. Currently I have 5 Nunu guides on my channel, 4 of which I believe are jungle guides and one of them is a Nunu support guide. And I've been playing Nunu for 3 or 4 seasons. I stopped playing him towards the end of season 7, but up until then I'd still been playing a decent amount of him since season 3. When I first started making this video, I was really tempted to just make it about Nunu jungle. The issue with that is people are playing Nunu top lane, mid lane, jungle, and support. So by me saying don't play Nunu jungle, it wouldn't really be doing you guys much justice. The main issue with Nunu top lane, mid lane, jungle, and support is just that. His kit is all over the board. He was made in a time in League of Legends where champions didn't have designated or assigned role or roles that they should play. Nunu's passive is Visionary. His basic attacks grants and Visionary stacks at 5 stats. He gets a free ability to use without costing any mana, and it's slightly empowered. As a support, this isn't very useful because a Nunu doesn't get many chances to auto attack minions. Since he's melee, he'd get abused a lot. Also, he could mess up his AD carry's farm. So as a support, this doesn't really make sense. In general, his passive really doesn't do much. Most of the time when you're playing as or against a Nunu, you forget he has a passive altogether. Nunu's Q is Consume, which is made almost exclusively for the jungle. He can use it on minions to help sustain him through the lane. It does only scale 75% with his AP, thus stacking only AP won't help him out too much as a top laner, mid laner, or support. It does have a fairly long cooldown starting at 12 seconds, so you're rarely going to be using it on minions, just maybe to get a quick kill. You're usually going to be using it in the jungle on large monsters to clear your camps faster. A huge issue with this spell is it doesn't really benefit Nunu support, top lane, or mid lane. Less noticeable issue is this is Nunu's only real ability to help him clear monster camps, and it's only single target. So when it comes to things like raptors and wolves camps and golems, he moves at a snail's pace when he's clearing it. Nunu's W is Blood Boil. It gives him and an ally a little bit extra attack speed. Now this does benefit Nunu as a support. It doesn't benefit him as a top laner or mid laner since those are solo areas. You can argue as a jungler, since usually when you're attacking an enemy it's in a gank and you can Blood Boil a teammate, but overall it's not very helpful. It also doesn't actually damage the enemy champion. You can't use this as a spell to damage. It just gives you a little bit of extra attack speed. Another issue that Nunu runs into with his W is the fact that it doesn't scale off of anything. It has absolutely zero scaling whatsoever, which sucks for Nunu really bad since his Q, E, and ultimate all scale with AP. So even when Nunu stacks AP, his W won't get any stronger, which encourages Nunu to not build AP in the first place. Also sucks for him since, once again, 3 of his abilities do scale with AP. It puts Nunu in a bit of a weird spot. If they made this ability scale with HP or any other stat, it would add a lot more build options and play options and build options for Nunu. Nunu's E is Ice Blast. This is the only reason whatsoever why you can even remotely play Nunu as a top laner, mid laner, or support. It's his core damage output. The main issue with Nunu's Ice Blast is it costs loads of mana and its range is relatively short. It's got roughly the same range as the average AD carry's range. So for you to run up and hit an AD carry with it, you're usually going to take at least 2 auto attacks. In late game, that is about half your health as Nunu unless you go tank. It costs loads of mana. Unless you're able to constantly auto attack the minions, you're really not going to be able to use this in lane too much without completely draining your mana source. Nunu mid lane, top lane, and support used to be a lot more viable whenever his Ice Ball scaled with 100% AP, but then they did nerf it because they decided, hey, here's a crappy champion, let's cut it down to 90%. That doesn't seem like a lot, but in the mid and late game, that's a really big slap in the face. It is fair to say that if the rest of Nunu's kit was either buffed or changed, that way it didn't suck, Nunu's Ice Ball wouldn't have to be changed because it's a strong enough ability on its own, but it's not strong enough to carry the rest of his turn of a kit. And finally, we have Absolute Zero. Now, this ultimate is one of the highest damage dealing spells in all of League of Legends. With that being said, you can argue that is also the worst ultimate in League of Legends since you have to stand still to use it and it channels for 3 full seconds. The only way an enemy is going to run into this, the only way you can make use of this is if you're in a bush that's not warded and an enemy is dumb enough to walk through it. You might be saying, oh, you could just use that in a team fight though. Literally every CC other than a snare will cancel this ultimate. Very difficult to get off in a team fight. There's virtually every champion in League of Legends has some sort of CC that can stop it. Also, it's on a really long cooldown and has a really high mana cost. I'm going to give you guys a quick refresher over his abilities real fast. Nunu's passive is so irrelevant you forget he has it even if you're playing as him. Nunu's Q is essentially only useful if you're a jungler, thus crippling Nunu top, mid, and support out of an ability. Nunu's Blood Boil isn't very helpful at all for a top lane Nunu, mid lane Nunu. The only position where Nunu can take full advantage of his Blood Boil is as support, and even then it's really not good until later in the game when your AD carry actually has some items, thus marking a Nunu with 2 useless abilities. Nunu's E is Ice Blast, the only redeeming quality in his kit. It does a good job at trying to carry the rest of his crappy abilities. It can't quite do it on its own. And then we have his ultimate, Absolute Zero, one of the highest potential damage outputs in the whole game, except you have to stand still for 3 freaking seconds to put out the maximum damage. If they would let Nunu move or do anything while casting it, it would make it a lot better and a lot more usable in a team fight. Not to mention you can easily cancel it with virtually any ability. We've thoroughly gone over why Nunu isn't a viable champion as a top laner, mid laner, jungler, or support. Now let's go over some of the changes Riot can apply without doing a whole kit rework. For Nunu's passive, all they would have to do is make it more visually noticeable and make it statistically stronger on the buff that it applies to his abilities when he does use it. Whenever Nunu uses his passive, he gets a little aura around him which you can hardly see, and the next spell he uses gets a very slight buff. By adding extra damage or effects to any of his abilities when using his passive, this could easily slingshot Nunu back into being a viable jungler. Another thing they could do is make Nunu's Q apply a little bit of AoE damage, especially when Nunu's passive is up. That would be really good, help him out with AoE camps. As it currently stands, he can't really clear camps very well at all unless it is a single target camp. Things like raptors and wolves take him for absolutely ever because his auto attacks don't do diddly dick. For Nunu's W, I would really like to see them add an HP scaling or maybe a movement speed scaling to it. As it stands, leveling up Nunu's W at all doesn't feel very rewarding since it doesn't scale off of anything. It's kind of like having a useless ability that you don't even want until maybe the super late game when your AD carry has a bunch of items. For Nunu's E, I think it'd be really cool if it did AoE whenever Nunu's passive was up, so whenever it hits an enemy, it does a little AoE area, kind of like an Iceborne Gauntlet, but ranged. I think that would be really cool and make him a lot more viable as a support or in any role in general. Whenever Nunu's passive is up, I would like to see him be able to move with his ultimate, kind of like how Galio can move with his taunt. That way, whenever Nunu ult, it feels more dynamic and a lot more team play rather than just random luck of the enemy happening to walk into a bush while you're channeling it. This would provide certain challenges since Nunu's ultimate does apply such a big slow. They could either cut down on the slow or make it to where if you hit Nunu, it makes Nunu move even slower. As it stands though, Nunu standing still is very archaic and not very rewarding to use. Another really cool thing they could do is whenever Nunu is blood boiled and you hit him, it makes his ult do way more damage. So whenever he's moving at you with his blood boil and ult on, you don't actually want to hit him. You might want to CC him, but you don't want to hit him with auto attacks because you're just going to be making him do more damage. These are a couple of changes and buffs they can give to Nunu off the top of my head. If they do apply any or all of these changes that I mentioned, Nunu's current kit will be mostly intact. Everything will still work the same, just with a slight enhancements. Something that's really important and worth mentioning is that whenever a champion can play so many different roles and positions for Nunu, top lane, mid lane, jungle, and support, it's usually because there's one single ability that is way overtuned in their kit. In Nunu's case, it's his E like we discussed. So if they did rework Nunu and gave him any of the buffs that I mentioned, they would probably have to tone back his E quite a bit by making it cost a lot more mana, by giving it a higher cooldown, or making it do less damage. One thing I did forget to mention about buffing or potentially reworking Nunu is that they need to add more scalings. By only having AP scalings, it can encourage really unhealthy behaviors with his ice ball. For example, when Nunu was played top lane and mid lane, he would just sit there and pound your ass with ice balls non-stop. There was very little counterplay because Nunu top lane and mid lane can usually auto the minions fairly non-stop if he gets a bit of a lead in lane because you can't push him off the minions, so he'll just keep getting his passive up and pounding you. By making Nunu's AP scaling not as high and making him scale off of a different stat, they can help balance out his abusiveness in the top and mid lane and help him to be more viable as a support and jungler, or potentially rework him into a more tanky version and put him in the top lane. After all is said and done, Nunu will most likely only be able to play 2, maybe 3 roles max. He will no longer be the jack of all trades, kind of crappy at everything he does. I'm honestly just surprised Nunu has remained untouched for so long, and I genuinely do hope he makes his way back into the meta because he adds a certain dynamic of utility that other champions simply don't provide. Those are just my thoughts on the matter though. Do you guys think Nunu is strong, weak? Let me know down in the comments below. I'm interested to see what you have to say. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help me out a lot. If any of you are interested in joining a super cool community full of super cool people, don't forget to check out my Discord. It is down in the description below. My name is KingStix. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.